So, Professor Taub, it has been quite some time since you and I have seen and spoken to one another. Welcome back to Mea Culpa. So much going on. I mean, literally so much going on. At least if we put it onto a timeline from where we were when we spoke last to today, it's out of control. I do really want to jump right into it because the hour goes by quickly. So, Jen, Trump is now threatening to revoke federal funding from schools like Harvard and Columbia over campus protests that he calls illegal, despite that there's actually no real evidence of any criminal activity, just differences of opinion. Isn't this a blatant First Amendment violation where the government punishes free speech because it doesn't align with what Trump says is illegal? And more importantly, when the law becomes whatever the president feels in the moment, what's left of constitutional protection?
So the first question you asked, the answer is absolutely yes. What he is doing is interfering in our most treasured right. It's in the First Amendment, right? Our freedom of speech. And you see that in the way he is threatening Harvard and the other campuses. There you got it. Constitution, flip forward a little bit. And the deal is, it's the same thing, Michael, that's going on with Rumsaya Ozturk. Is that her name? The Tufts graduate student who was, just arrested, just taken into custody without any justification and was whisked away and is now in prison. And as you may have seen, same kinds of things you're talking about. Her lawyer was before a panel of federal judges, and they said, basically, bottom line is, it looks like she didn't the judges know they have not accused her of any crime. And the only reason why she seemed to have been rounded up in the first place was because she wrote an op-ed for a newspaper, college newspaper, that was pro-Palestinian in such a way that didn't align with what Donald Trump's viewpoint is of Israel-Palestine. And so the judges said, so let's just ask to the judge for the Justice Department, her op-ed, that's protected speech, right? And you know what the lawyer said? I'm not authorized to answer that. And the judge pushed back, and he refused to say that that's protected speech. So the answer to your second question is, what do we have now, Michael? You were
what do we have?
You are the canary in the coal mine, right? You were a political prisoner. I'm sure you've mentioned this before, when they threw you back in prison when you would not give away your First Amendment right to write a book about your experience. The same thing is going on now, but it is amplified. And as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he doesn't have to follow the Constitution if it doesn't align with what he wants to do. That's where we are. And Judge, go ahead.
That is where we are.
And, Judge Ludig was speaking with our Ali Velshi. And if you saw this, and there's actually a school, you can call it a school, a constitutional theory called constitutional denialism, which is basically the very right-wing legal theorists. And I say that with disdain. I mean, anyone can have a theory, but their view is F. Marbury versus Madison. We don't think the Supreme Court has the last say. And whatever the president thinks the Constitution means, it means. That is their view. And they may call it constitutional denialism. I call it, if they think he should be a king. That's where we are. Donald Trump thinks he's a king, and nothing will stop him unless he is impeached and removed from office.
It's interesting because you called me the canary in the coal mine, which I have called myself many, many times, amongst other things like stupid for getting involved with Trump. But, all you need to do is just to Google the key points of Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein's decision. And the big part, despite the fact I could not get the Supreme Court on a writ of certiorari to hear my case, which I believe is possibly one of the most important constitutional issues of the last 100 plus years. If they would have heard my case, what happened to, say, this young lady from Tufts, Mahmoud Khalil, and so many others would not be taking place right now. In the decision, Judge Hellerstein determined that the government's decision to send Michael Cohen back to prison after he had been furloughed was retaliatory, specifically because Cohen was planning to publish a book critical of President Trump. The judge found that requiring Cohen to agree to a media ban, which would have prevented him from publishing his book as a condition of home confinement, violated Cohen's First Amendment rights to free speech. And I can go on and on and on, but so many of my loyal Mea Culpa followers have heard me talk about this. I have been yelling this from the rooftops, not because I want to hear myself speak, not because I want to put myself up onto a pedestal, because my biggest concern has always been that what they did to me, it's so painful, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. I don't ever want that to happen to anyone else ever again. Now, these folks aren't technically U.S. citizens, so they don't even fall under constitutional protections. They do fall under due process rights, but only U.S. citizens actually have constitutional protection. I was a little bit shocked,
well, you're right. It depends which protections, right?
Correct. That's the point I was gonna then make. But all I was saying is we're now seeing, for example, judges get locked up. Once they start doing that and getting away with it, I assure you, this country is going to exist in pandemonium like we have never experienced before in our country's almost 250-year history.
Yeah. And, we say this, and it's hard as the words come out of our mouths and we say it, and we know, and you know better than anyone else that there is no bottom. I don't know why this isn't more of an alarm, why this isn't more the focus in the media and the newspapers. Michael, I'll never forget, and you probably won't either, in the spring of 2019, when there were hearings about, I'm forgetting which of the hearings there were, but you were testifying before a congressional hearing.
The one that you're referring to, by the way, the live one, was before the House Oversight Committee. What most people are unaware of is that I also testified behind the skiff in closed door to 6 other congressional committees.
So, right. So this one happened after, right? And this is the one in which you said, and it gave me chills, you said Donald Trump won't leave office if he won't leave office.
Can I tell you word for word what I said?
Yeah,
can I tell you word for word what I said?
Yes.
Word for word, what I said was my biggest fear is that if Trump loses the election in 2020, there will never be a peaceful transfer of power. And you're right.
That's what you said. I'm sorry. That's what you meant. But yes. And you were right.
Yeah.
And
2 years.
You know the man.
2 years before it even happened.
So what's the hard thing about this is people are like, well, let's not, a lot of people are like, let's not talk about the past. Let's just look at right now. But the past and his personality informs what he'll do. And I don't know if you agree with this. You probably know better than I, but I see him in a huge decline, even more so, even more dementia, even more chaos in his brain, and even more aggression than I've seen before. The other day when he had that White House press conference, and he had business leaders, and he had this sort of weird fantasy that was like, oh, this place could blow up. That was weird. And then his face looks very drawn. He looks low energy. And his explanation for why he wants Alcatraz to be rebuilt was batshit crazy. Does that seem different to you, or is it the same stuff for you?
So it is somewhat different, but I want to make this crystal clear to my listeners. And I'm fortunate to have such a large listening audience because I don't have to repeat it 1,000 times to get it out to a large group of people. Donald Trump does not have dementia. Donald Trump is not out of his mind insane. The next question actually touches on it, because let me take it to you this way and explain how they connect. This administration, this Trump administration, argues that executive power overrules judicial interpretation if it's deemed legitimate. In fact, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, even said that judges cannot limit the president. That's what's going on here. Whatever he says, whatever he does, he thinks he is permitted to do. You brought this up, and I want to touch on it. Isn't this an open rejection of Marbury versus Madison and the very idea of constitutional checks and balances? Trump sees a movie. I don't know, Escape from Alcatraz. He could see the one with Kevin Bacon. I forget what it's called, First Degree or whatever it was.
I thought you were going to say Diner, because I loved that movie, but no.
And all of a sudden he's like, oh, that would be a great place to start locking people up. It's a visual sort of thing. It's really, it's ugly. It's dark. It sits in the San Francisco Bay. There's always a haze over it. This, as Stephen Miller turns around and says, this should be enough to scare the shit out of people to stop committing crimes again and again and again. And the argument that they make is that it is the worst of the worst, the people who are locked up forever that are continuing to commit crimes. And I'm just unsure where they even coming up with this nonsense. But then again, they don't care because, again, everything that Trump says as president overrides everybody else. That's the point I wanted to make.
And I love that you brought up the J.D. Vance comment at the beginning, because Ludwig brought that up too. And I don't need to use fancy language like constitutional denialism, but I'm using it for a reason, because the people who are going to justify Donald Trump continuing to shred the Constitution and lock up his enemies without due process, the people who are going to justify that are going to use language that makes it look like it's legit. And it's absolutely not legit. And the other thing I think you probably heard along these lines, and this is going to tie into no more checks and balances, Supreme Court doesn't have a say. You probably have heard this comment where Donald Trump said about due process, the most basic thing, and you probably remember this from law school, we teach about due process, which it appears in the 5th and 14th Amendment, is due process means the government can't take away your life, your liberty, or your property without due process of law. And what that means is notice before they try to take your life, your freedom, or your property, and an opportunity to be heard. And so you can't just say to someone, you're guilty, and now I'm going to put you on a plane and send you to El Salvador, or you're guilty and I'm putting you on a boat and locking you up forever. This is at the center of why we had a flippin' revolution, right? If you read the Declaration of Independence, there's this section of it just about this, right? It's unbelievable what he's doing.
Jen, did you remember? Do you remember when they asked him, when there was a journalist asked Trump, you have the Declaration of Independence hanging on your wall. It's not the original, but he has it hanging behind the Resolute desk, covered with a little sort of tapestry so that the sun doesn't ruin it. And they asked him, what does the Declaration of Independence mean to you? And his response
was that real? I thought that was a joke. That's real?
No, it's not a joke. That was real. It's a declaration. It's an important declaration. It's of love. It's a declaration of love. And
right.
And I sat there and I said, "Holy shit!"
It is, all of the above. I was, right. No, you're right. It's a Terry Moran who was asking him. This language, I'm going to read to you this key language. Okay, this is not what I'm telling you now from the Declaration of Independence. I'm not like cherry picking. I'm literally reading, here's my phone, literally reading like 4 lines that all go together. And it's like Donald Trump looked at this and said, oh, that shit sounds good. Okay, so why do we declare independence from King George III? Here's one thing: for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, that would be the tariffs,
The tariffs.
for
Yeah.
depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. Which brings us to Donald Trump thinks that he needs to get rid of 1 million people, but he doesn't have time for 1 million trials. So he's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. He said that.
He said it.
And where
not
the
me,
fuck
not
is
you.
the news? Why isn't everything stopped? Donnie $2, whatever. Why don't people just say, stop everything? This man's a maniac, and he's going to round up 1 million people and lock them up in fucking Alcatraz or El Salvador. Why is no one paying attention?
Michael, you know where else people
you.
aren't paying attention, by the way, Jen? They're not paying attention to the fact that also in Panama, in the jungle, that they have built internment camps. And there are people right now, there are migrants that have been sent off to Panama that are in the jungle, in internment camps, that we're not even talking about them. We're talking about the chaos of the day. We're talking about those people that are being, what do they keep calling them? Disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And sent off. We're talking about
Yep.
the names like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We're not talking about John or Jane Doe migrant and their children that are right now in a Panamanian fucking jungle in an internment camp. I mean, this is so out of control. And you're right. Why are people not talking about it? Because they are, as Steve Bannon would say, they are flooding us every second of the day with a fire hose of executive orders, a fire hose of chaos and insanity, to the extent that our minds are not capable. They are not capable of dealing with all of this. It's also why Trump is always referring to, you'll find that out in 2 weeks. You'll find that out in about a month, because he doesn't believe that the American people have the intelligence and the capacity to remember things more than 5 days. 5 days is the maximum. So when he says 2 weeks, you're already on to the next crisis. You're not thinking about, again, my faithful listeners, the Panamanian jungle internment camps.
And Michael, I know why you're so angry. It comes from the pain, and I think our shared family histories. The Holocaust is very much part of, we were raised as Jewish Americans to know never again. And we now know, I was thinking about this today on my show, across this country, there are young girls and Frank's age and families. God knows they're hiding in basements, in attics, kids not going to school, people terrified of what could happen to them, that they could end up in this Panamanian jungle prison or El Salvador or Alcatraz, or babies separated from their mothers. I don't think there is anything more inhumane than ICE or whoever it was showing up at a hospital as a woman was giving birth so they could try to arrest her. If that's not the definition, and by the way, she'd committed no crime. People say someone's here illegally. That's a civil offense. That's not a crime for which you get locked up. And this idea,
not according to this new administration, that's certainly for sure.
Right. And Michael, I don't, when you say this, it's so good speaking with you, because you bring it all back to the inhumanity of this and the reminder that Donald Trump isn't wrong. It's not that we don't have the capacity to remember. I believe it's the mainstream press who thinks that it's not really easy to sell cars and soap and financial products if people are depressed about the fascist president. So because of, and I'm not criticizing capitalism per se, markets, work as they work, but someone needs to, of course they need to make money or they can't stay on the air. But someone like Jeff fucking Bezos at the Washington Post, who has more money than God, or Sherry Redstone,
or Rupert Murdoch with
Rupert Murdoch, they could sacrifice for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a few days, and they could bring down this presidency, which it should be brought down if they wanted to. Well, but they don't, because they don't They don't mind a world, not just America, where there are the elites and there are peasants. And for all the libertarians who talked about the road to feudalism was going to come from our, democratic bureaucracy, no, the road to fiefdom is in front of us. And that's what we're going to have in the US and in the world. And it's coming soon, because when the shelves start to be empty and people are losing their jobs, Donald Trump won't take the blame for that. He'll find someone.
Of course not. Of course he will. But Jen, here's the thing. Trump is not wrong. I've witnessed it myself, literally going back to the days that I was there for almost a decade and a half. The American people have a very short attention span. They basically follow the news headlines that you get on the TikToks and the social media, or what, as you said, media, mainstream media or cable news media starts telling you. And that's why Trump comes up with all of the crazy things that he does. And I constantly have these fights and these conversations with people who are intelligent. They just don't have, for example, the instant memory recall that maybe you and I do. And so that's why it's incumbent upon us to continue to repeat it over and over and over again, so that, like the McDonald's or the Burger King jingle, it gets ingrained into your brain.
Right.
That's what Trump does. I want to remind you about a quote that Trump made. He quoted Napoleon. Do you remember his quote to Napoleon? No, he said, "He who saves the country does not violate any law."
Oh,
he said
right.
This. He who saves the country does not violate any law. So to you, a constitutional professor, is that a constitutional philosophy or the mindset of an autocrat who believes the ends justify the means?
Well, just to clarify, I technically don't have the stature of a constitutional law professor like my professor Larry Tribe.
Well,
my areas of law, as you probably remember, are white collar crime, corporate governance, and those intersect, and corruption. Those intersect with what we're talking about. So, it's, this goes back. If he's going to quote Napoleon, let me quote Louis Brandeis. We can have large concentrations of power, or we can have democracy, but we can't have both. And so the conditions that allowed for Donald Trump to get to where he is and stay where he is have a lot to do with the dismantling of respect for the democratic process. And we can bring it back to how much money is in politics, right? We can bring it back to Citizens United. I mean, we can see how we got here.
This episode of Mea Culpa is brought to you by Graza, my new favorite olive oil. It's fresh, it's never blended, and it comes from a single type of olive, the Picual, straight out of Jaén, Spain, where over half of the world's olive oil is produced. So why Graza? Single origin goodness, that's why. Only one olive from one region. No mysterious blends. That means a traceable, a fresher product without mixing in any low grade or unknown oils. It's super fun. It has squeeze and spray bottles too. So there's no more messy tins or drippy spouts. Just aim, squeeze, and go. I mean, there are 3 types for any task that you have. One, they have something called frizzle. That's their newest, with a higher 490 degree Fahrenheit smoke point, which is perfect for frying, crisping, or grilling. Sizzle at 410 degrees Fahrenheit, which is an everyday cooking oil for roasting, marinating, and sauteing. Then they have something called drizzle, which is a bold, a punchy finishing oil that you sprinkle on your salads, you dip your bread in, or even you top it off on your ice cream. Look, let me be clear. My daughter is the actual chef in the house, and she uses olive oil on everything from pastas to preparing steak. I mean, not only does this cook well, it smells delicious. Plus, as a healthy eater, Graza's extra virgin oils, they are loaded with those heart and brain friendly polyphenols. So it's good for you. Look, so here's what you get. You get 10% off your first order on Graza's site. But I personally suggest grabbing the trio. That's all the 3 squeezy bottles, the sizzle, the frizzle, and the drizzle, so that you're set for every style of cooking. So head right now to graza.co and use code Cohen to get 10% off of Trio, which includes, again, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle, and get to cooking your next chef quality meal. Again, head to Graza, graza.co, and use code Cohen, Cohen, to get 10% off the Trio. And I love saying it, sizzle, frizzle, and drizzle. So get cooking now.
But it's not simple. You know, Hansel and Gretel, that fairy tale we read when we were kids, and they were trying to get away from their, the wicked witch person or the stepmother. And they go out into the woods, but they don't want to get lost, right? So what do? Do you remember what they did?
They drop little breadcrumbs, sure.
Little breadcrumbs along the way with the hope that they could follow them back when they needed to. Well, it's not that easy, right? We may have dropped the breadcrumbs that led us to the point where we have gotten have now been swept away or eaten by the birds, right? You cannot follow the same path back that got us here. And so I wonder, part of the job, you say, for you and Midas Touch, and now you're saying, all of us, to remind people of the truth. But what can people do with their disappointment and energy, besides hitting the streets on June 14th or helping out their family or building out networks? What do we do? What steps can we take to get this guy out of power? It's desperate right now.
There is an answer to it. To my faithful Mea Culpa listeners, to my faithful YouTube listeners on that show, and my Substack, join the community. Be an active participant in the community. Share the information. Share this community. Share my Substack, my YouTube community. Why? Because the more people that get involved. So imagine, like I was saying to someone just the other night, I have about 1 million some odd people that follow me on a regular basis between all of my social media platforms. And a lot of people will say, oh my God, that's a lot of people. Bullshit. It's not. 1 million people sounds like a lot when I'm comparing it to yours, but it's not a lot in the scheme of what we're trying to effectuate. And that is a massive blue fucking tsunami come 2026 so that we can put an end to this reign of terror, that we can go ahead and hold individuals accountable. You see, right now, as the House, the Senate, the White House, and even in many occasions, the Supreme Court, they are all Republican controlled. They are controlled by Donald J. Trump, which goes back to why I had said that, you cannot, as J.D. Vance said, you cannot limit the power of the president. That's what they believe. And not that they do or they don't believe it. It's what they are doing, right? I want to use that as a great segue into something that was on my mind that you brought up before, and that was Steve Bannon, right? Who is still very active with Trump, even though he's not on board like the Elon Musks of the world. But he described the approach that you and I were talking about as flooding the zone.
Right.
Flooding the zone with executive action after executive action after executive action to overwhelm us, the American people, but more specifically, the courts. You think that this creates a scenario where illegality is insulated by sheer volume? And more importantly, how did the courts respond to that strategy structurally?
So I want to answer your question directly and sideways. But the first part of your question, part one, was how doesn't this, doesn't the way Steve Bannon's description of what Trump does is sort of flooding the zone. In the flooding the zone, that zone, there are many zones, right? You describe one of the zones as being all of us, right? Then there's also the courts. Like he's flooding every zone so that everyone is overwhelmed. So every institutional system can be, as it's overwhelmed, either taken down or taken over, right? I think that is absolutely happening right now. And what's going on, though, this is my follow the money brain. I think you know exactly what's going on. He's taking in billions of dollars in the equivalent of bribes through this stupid cryptocurrency company. And the more money he takes, and it's not just about the illegality, because we already know John Roberts and his fellows on the court have, immunized him. It's that more money is more power, is more control over not just our future elections, but across the globe. So, I just feel like one of the hardest things in all of the flooding the zone is when people say, that's a distraction, or don't look at that, that's a distraction. And it's so hard, though, to resist some of the distractions, because for me, and I'm guilty of this, right? Mea culpa, as they say, I need to laugh. I like to laugh at him, because if I don't laugh, I cry. And so I participate in the, isn't this stupid what he said here or there? Because I also believe that the endorphins you get from laughing or laughing at someone helps you bond. But then I am missing kind of, this process of how we need to do what you're saying, which is really organized. We need to flood the zone. And what is that number, Michael? Is it like, is they say 3.5% of the population? Like we need 10 million people in the streets. You've heard these different numbers.
Yes, and that's the point I was trying to make. So take my 1 million people. If I could combine that with hypothetically Midas Touch's 5 million people and Lincoln Project's 3 million people, and Norm Eisen's organization of 2 million people, and then
assuming they don't overlap too much. I mean, they overlap a little,
right? But then again, then you have to take a percentage out as being overlaps, right? People who like me obviously like Midas Touch. People who like Midas Touch like so and so. We start doing things like that. Okay, but when you get to 50 million people, you now have an army of voters in order to do what is necessary, not just for the state of California, the state of New York, the state of Chicago, or so on, right? Where you can effectuate results in ruby red states. Because here's the thing, and now is the time to act. Right now. Why? Simply because Trump's acts, these executive orders that they are just throwing out there, the people that they are hurting are the people in the ruby red states, the people who voted for Trump, the people who put him back into power. So when they can't afford moms or dads insulin because they have to help to support them on the medicine, because the parents can't pay for the medication, their rent and food. And now they have to take away from the extra dollars that they have for their family, or maybe they don't have it at all and everybody starts pooling money together and so on. Look at what Trump has now done to the farmers, just the farmers alone, with the stupid tariff trade war that he has with China. 80% of soy produced in America was going to China. What did China say? You want to play this game, bitch? I tell you what, go fuck yourself in Macy's window. We're not taking your fucking soy. Stuff it up your ass. Give it to a fucking horse or Billy.
Wait, how do you say that in Mandarin?
I don't know, but I can look it up in a second if you really want.
No,
this is what we have the same issue. By the way, so we have the same issue. For example, you have Trump meeting with Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada. And, in one respect, they're being very respectful to one another, but that's part of the political optic game. Trump has every intention of doing the same thing to Mark Carney that he did to Justin Trudeau. The same exact thing. And he, even in front of his face, after being told some things are not for sale, like this building, talking about the White House, like Buckingham Palace. You think Elon Musk can't buy Buckingham Palace? Of course he can, but it ain't for sale. That's the whole thing. And so Canada is not for sale to America. This is the whole point. He's just constantly. It's like the juggler who's juggling balls of fire and then spitting in the air and doing somersaults. You can't take your eye off the prize. We all need to accumulate this large number of people so that when we say we are going to meet on the Great Lawn in front of the Capitol or by the Washington Monument or Lincoln Memorial or something, you end up with millions of people screaming. And that's the only way, because that's what democracy was created for. That's what our founding fathers created when they were putting together, right, our Constitution.
I got a name for that.
Tell me.
How about this, Michael? The 10 Million American March.
All right.
Instead of the million, I think it could work. Wait, I got to tell you this thing. You probably don't know this. I moved back to Michigan. So
I did not know that.
State. Oh, yes. I'm teaching at Wayne State. Hey, you know sure. Michigan?
I do.
Okay. So, because you were in law school in my beautiful state. So anyway, I'm now a professor at Wayne State. My family's from here. And as you know, Canada is our neighbor to the south, right?
I don't know. What are you about? 40 miles or so?
What?
What are you, like 40, 50 miles from the border?
Oh, no. I am a mile from the border where I teach.
Oh, you're that close. Holy crap.
I'm in Detroit.
So you're right near Windsor.
In Detroit.
So you're literally like right near Windsor.
Yeah, I have family in Windsor, etc. But this Canada stuff, and Michigan is, as you know, a purple state.
Yeah.
And Michigan went for Trump. And it's crazy. And I fear, Ford is doing new forecasts. Everyone criticized Gretchen Whitmer for going down to the White House. You know how she was trying to hide from the camera?
Mm-hmm.
But she's termed out. She can't run for governor anymore. She knows she's not going to be president. And I actually think she had no choice. Now, of course, he's going to fuck her over, but she sacrificed her career to try to do something for us. But at the end of the day, he's going to, he's not going to lift the tariffs. You heard when he was saying, when Carney said, Canada's not for sale, just like Buckingham Palace, some things aren't for sale, Canada isn't. And then someone asked him, and you probably remember this quote better. A reporter asked him, is there anything that would get you to lift the tariffs? And Donald said, no. And they said, why? And he said, just because, kind of.
Yeah. That's exactly how he said it. Yeah. Look, the philosophy of this administration is crazy. If we're going to, again, stay on this whole idea of their violating rights, this administration is arguing we'll go to birthright citizenship. Citizenship. You were talking about the woman who's having a child here, right, in America, who gets picked up by ICE. He's arguing that birthright citizenship no longer applies to the children of undocumented immigrants. Where he pulled, what ass he pulled that from, I don't know. Because even though the 14th Amendment clearly says otherwise. The 14th Amendment says otherwise. So the question I want to ask you, how dangerous is it when a president simply decides to reinterpret the Constitution unilaterally?
How bad is it? It means that he's a king. It's the equivalent of him declaring "L'état c'est moi." Is that how you say that in French?
I don't know. I don't speak French.
I think it means I am the state. I don't speak French either. I speak a little Spanish, a little English, a little law. But yeah, the Supreme Court is going to take on this birthright citizen issue. But you know how before I told you that there are some people who will just create lofty legal theories to justify something clearly illegal? And there are some law professors who are trying to argue, despite the plain language of the Constitution and that Wong Kim Ark case from, I forgot, I'm looking at the date of that one. That came down in 1898, the landmark case saying, and I'm quoting the Supreme Court, a child born in the United States, it's basically that a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent who at his time of his birth are subject to the Emperor of China, that child was a citizen, right? That's what the Supreme Court decided. And they interpreted the language subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And basically, the idea is that he was a citizen. And that goes way back. That was under the 14th Amendment. So I don't understand how there are people who want to justify this legally. This isn't a legal justification. This is about white supremacy. You have these people saying Americans aren't having enough babies. Lots of babies are being born here, but they don't want babies from places they don't consider white. And this is what's going on. And we could have a welcoming nation and stick by the Constitution, but that's not what they're trying to do here. And they've made this clear. I mean, you know better than anyone that Melania came to the United States and wasn't herself a citizen when she came here. And there's some question as to why she got an Einstein visa, but you don't hear Donald talking about how his wife was an illegal, do you?
No, of course not. But, you were using, the nice French term and so on. I personally prefer to quote from the movie The Dark Knight when Alfred, what's his name? Like Alfred Pennyweather or something like that. Pennyworth is talking to Bruce Wayne. And he turns around and he says, there are individuals who aren't driven by logic or reason. They're just willing to engage in these destructive acts for the sake of chaos. They just want to watch the world burn. That was the quote from Alfred. And the more I think about it, the more I think about Elon Musk, the more I think about J.D. Vance. I don't think Trump actually wants to see the world burn. I think he actually would prefer to see himself at the helm. But these guys like Vance and Musk and others, they really do want to see the world burn. These two assholes have floated the idea, for example, because again, this is not Donald Trump ideology. And again, I know him. It benefits him, so he's willing to go along with it. And I want, again, my listeners to hear me on this. If it benefits him, he's willing to allow it to take place. If it didn't, he would shut that shit down immediately. But take Vance and take Musk. These two have floated the idea of ignoring court rulings that they don't agree with. So hypothetically, if the Supreme Court of the United States rules against Trump, and then he just shrugs it off, their belief is, so what? What the hell are you going to do about it? Is there a legal mechanism to enforce those rulings on a rogue executive? Or basically, do we just sit here and say, oh my God, I really hope that Donald and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk and the rest of these enablers and these sycophantic assholes, I hope to God that they just, acknowledge the ruling and allow it to be enforced?
Well, as you know, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. So the only way to discipline a president who doesn't want to follow the law is to have the House impeach him, the Senate convict, and remove. That's it. So what we're talking about right now is a handful of Republicans in the House, and you only need 20 Republicans in the Senate. We're talking about fewer than 24 people in the world. They have in their hands the ability to rip the levers of power away from Donald Trump, and they're not. I want to ask you a question, though, because I think I'm getting something. When you said Donald Trump doesn't want to see things burn or crash or get destroyed, do you think, though, that one of the benefits for him having that is that if he drives down the economy and drives down prices and creates chaos, then when he snaps his fingers and it gets back to better, if that happens, he can then take credit for the rise? Is that what he's thinking? I mean, you know him better than I would. Otherwise, why would he? No, he's not thinking.
No, he's not thinking that. He's playing a much bigger game, right? Think about
Okay.
like what's happening in Russia right now with the attack on Ukraine. It's all about expansionism. We turn around, we take a look at China having every intention of taking Taiwan. It's all about expansionism. By the way, let's go back to Russia, to dear old Vladimir. As soon as he takes Ukraine, he's going back into Poland. And after Poland, he wants to go
Right.
into the Baltics. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Now, let me be straight with you. As someone with a very public profile who spent years dealing with everything from harassment to bad faith actors digging into my life, I take my privacy very seriously because I've seen what can happen when personal data gets into the wrong hands. And let's be honest, it's never been easier to find out, for example, where someone lives, what their phone number is, or even who their family members are. I mean, that's not just creepy, it's dangerous. We're living in a time where partisans and trolls are targeting people simply for speaking their minds online. And if your info is just sitting out there, that makes you a sitting duck. And that's why I use Delete Me. They work behind the scenes to remove your personal data from hundreds of data broker sites. It's the smartest move I've made to protect my digital footprint. And it gives me peace of mind knowing I'm not just leaving that info out in the open. So take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up with Delete Me, now at a special discount for just our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting Cohen, Cohen, to 64000. The only way to get 20% off is to text Cohen to 64000. Again, that's Cohen to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. Go now. You ever try launching a podcast with zero experience? Well, let me tell you, it's like being tossed into a cage match with a grizzly bear, blindfolded, wearing clown shoes. I mean, when I started Mea Culpa, I thought to myself, come on, how hard can this be? Well, script writing, logos, production schedules, ad deals, and don't even get me started on the tech setup. I mean, I felt like I was decoding the damn Matrix. If only I had Shopify when I launched this beast. Shopify is the platform behind millions of businesses across the globe, responsible for a whopping 10%, you hear me? 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. And my friends, that's not hype. That's a fact. From big names like Mattel and Gymshark to folks just getting their hustle off the ground, Shopify's got their back. I mean, you want a gorgeous online store? Shopify's got hundreds of sleek, ready-to-go templates that make you look like a design god. And AI tools? Yeah, they've got those too. Writing your product descriptions, jazzing up your images, maybe even making you sound smarter than you actually are. I mean, not naming names or anything, right? I mean, need a marketing squad? Shopify's built-in tools let you hit email, Instagram, TikTok, wherever your customers are scrolling or doom scrolling. And listen, Shopify handles it all. Inventory, returns, international shipping. I mean, they are the ride or die business partner that you never knew that you needed. So if you got a big idea or even a little one and you're ready to turn that dream into a reality, head over to shopify.com/Cohen. So if you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify and sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Cohen. That's Shopify, SHOPIFY.com/Cohen. One more time, that's shopify.com/Cohen. Why? He wants to reform the former Soviet Union. That's what he wants to do. But it's not just them. You have Trump talking about taking over Canada, taking over Panama,
and
Greenland. Right? They are on an expansionist ideology. And
I've been
so,
calling it, instead of the Monroe Doctrine, I've been calling it the moron doctrine for him. But yeah,
yeah, well,
he wants
yeah,
to
yeah.
he
I
wants
mean,
to
that's what,
expand. And when you look at the globe, you can see where Greenland, what's on the other side too, obviously, Russia. So even though he's saying he's not going to take Canada, now he's backing off of that. And he's saying, no, I need Greenland. We're going to take it. It's like, again, this is the same, and I don't always liken him to Hitler, but it doesn't matter which totalitarian leader. You're pointing out this territorial expansion by force against the will of people who have sovereignty. What Putin's doing, what Trump wants to do, what she wants to do, that's the world we're in. And quite honestly, that's kind of always been the danger with these kinds of leaders. That's why we've tried to install democracy to stop it. And Michael, if you're going to quote movies on me, when I get depressed, do you know the film Chinatown with
of
Jack
course,
Nicholson?
sure.
So sometimes I just want to say, forget it, Michael. It's Trump Town.
Yeah, it is.
So
But
why? So
yeah,
should I just
go
give
ahead.
up and just go? Okay, yeah. What?
No, no. So it's funny that you say that, right? Because this administration, right? We can never give up. He wants you to give up. He wants you to be exhausted. The second that you give up, he wins. And just think about it this way too, because this administration, they argue that the president can fire any official, even those who are protected by statute, at will. Simply, he wakes up in the morning and he says, you know what? I didn't like what this guy said. I don't like what this guy wore. Whatever it is, at will, Trump believes that he could fire him, including, for example, the Fed Treasury Secretary.
You mean the chair of the Fed? Yeah.
Yes. How does this undermine the very purpose of creating these independent agencies to enforce laws without political interference? Because I think that is one of the most important things that nobody talks about. And they don't talk about it for a very good reason. It's difficult.
Setting aside the Jerome Powell, setting aside the Fed for 1 second. And if we talk about heads of other independent agencies, I have a little bit of a contrarian view on this. If you just think about this for a second. The one good thing about the court saying that agencies that Congress creates that can be overseen by the executive, even if they're independent, if the Supreme Court allows President Trump to get rid of the heads based on ideological or any reasons, the one very fucking good thing about that is if we ever get a Democratic president in office, they can clean house like this, and we're going to need to do that. So that's my contrarian view.
Well, okay. I mean, it makes perfect sense. But I want to then take us back on that idea to the 1930s, right? When FDR hacked the court, had that scheme which sparked massive outrage, even though, as he was claiming, he wanted to save the New Deal.
It did.
Fast forward now to Trump to 2025. Trump now talks openly about disempowering the judiciary itself. I mean, all I keep thinking about is that isn't this a more existential threat to judicial independence than anything FDR attempted to do or accomplished?
Yes. When he makes the kinds of threats he does, people make death threats to judges and, for example, try to kill them and their children die. I mean, I don't know if you've been following the judge. I've forgotten what her name is, but her son was killed. Edith somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, when they opened up the door. Yeah.
And he was there. Now people are sending her and other judges pizzas, and they're saying they're sent by, and they're using the name of the killer. They're threatening judges. He sent someone in to lock up a judge. We know that is a bigger threat. I want to go back though to the 30s and go back to Roosevelt and saving the New Deal. And one thing I didn't know until they had those hearings. Remember, Biden had that commission that ended up going nowhere. They had all these intellectuals, and they were
He
really,
had
really
he
had
had quite a
testimony.
few. He had quite a few that
Right.
went absolutely
And that he
nowhere.
still didn't expand the court when he could have. But
Right.
one thing about court expansion is when Roosevelt was planning to do that, to try to get Congress to expand the court, because Congress is the one who sets it, and everyone freaked out. That did discipline the Supreme Court because they worried they were going to lose their power. And that is actually, they made that pressure may have affected them. And so, yes, this is scarier because what Donald Trump is doing is he's backing John Roberts and everyone else into a corner, because if they create a ruling that he defies, then they lose their power. So that's why they put these like little wiggle words in, like the ruling about releasing Kilmar Abrego Garcia said that he had to facilitate his removal, not
as
effectuate.
opposed to effectuate, right?
And so that then they can save face and go, well, he facilitated. He asked, the president, Bukele of El Salvador, that's facilitating. So we're going to get a weaker and weaker Supreme Court so they can pretend they haven't lost their power.
Sure, but can I push back on you a tiny bit on this? Actually, more than a tiny bit. I have a totally different theory, Wonder Woman. I have a totally different theory onto it. So hypothetically here, there's a federal court judge that Trump wants to unilaterally, at will, kick the judge off the bench. Because he doesn't like the judge's rulings. The judge, does not acknowledge or adhere to the beliefs of this administration. And the Supreme Court wisely turned around and said, you can't do that. This is a federal court judge who was appointed by another president, and the tenure is for life. So why do I believe that the Supreme Court in this specific matter ruled the way they do? Why is it that with certain agencies and certain groups that they are not siding with Trump at all? And I believe that the reason is simply because if you could do it to a lower court federal judge, you can do it to them too. So they're not standing by whether this is constitutional or not, whether it acknowledges rule of law and processes. They are not. They're doing it to protect their own power and to protect, their positions on the Supreme Court as justices.
100%. And I think we actually agree more than you think, as I'm thinking about what you're saying. Yeah, they're trying to protect the court. But when you say to Trump's people, you can't take this judge's job away, it's easy for them to enforce that, because what is Pam Bondi going to have like cops circling the judge's chair and saying she can't sit on that chair? They won't do that.
Yes, they will do that. Yes, 100%. 100%. They will shut. What they will do is they will ban her from her, like they were trying to do to these law firms. You are banned from entering into a federal building.
Oh, courthouse. I see. Yeah. Okay, they could do that. And then I understand what you're saying. So what you're saying is they're trying to protect the judiciary no matter what. And I'm saying in a different way, they are, in that if they made a ruling to Donald Trump saying, oh, I see what you're saying. So they don't care as much. What you're saying is totally different. You're saying Kilmar Abrego Garcia and the rights under the Fifth Amendment aren't as important to them as judges are. Okay.
Yes.
I can agree with you.
Exactly what I'm saying. So look, Jen, the hour comes by, as I said, very, very quickly. I got about a million other questions I'd like to ask you, but I want to end with this one. All right. It appears like with state attorney generals are now filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit against the Trump administration to defend basic constitutional structures. Doesn't it feel like to you, because it feels like that to me, that it's actually the states are doing the work that Congress refuses to do?
Absolutely, Michael. I mean, thank God at this point we actually have this dual system of government, because we can at least have more control over the people we elect to the states. that might be, and this is why people care so much about the local school boards or the local sheriff's office. I mean, you talk about join the community. Yeah, we're going to be flooding the streets too. And we need to really make sure that the people in local and state office are Democrats who can fight back and say F off, just like the governor of Maine did. She stood up to Donald Trump and he backed off. Big lesson there. We need the states on our side.
Yeah. And again, though, by having a community, and I'm now reaching out to all of my listeners and so on, share this Mea Culpa podcast with your friends. Share my YouTube channel with your friends. Share my Substack. I put out an article every single morning, and then I do something with somebody, whether it's a Jim Acosta, a Don Lemon, Lev Parnas, Malcolm Nance, Joe Walsh, whomever it might be. I do stuff with them all the time. Why? To build the community so that we are so big. Remember the old expression, too big to fail? That's the goal, to build an organization that's so big that we don't need to rely on the DNC, because I don't believe the DNC is competent. And we watched as they shitted up this last time. I want people just to think before, in closing, imagine this: a man who was twice impeached, 4 times indicted, sexual assaulter, civilly held liable, criminally held liable, 34 counts, was a better alternative to be the leader of the free world than a black woman. And I want you to digest that and understand when I say, if we were able to build the organization that I'm referring to now, I tried desperately to get the DNC to help, to work with us on it. But of course, they knew better. It is up to us to save our democracy, not the DNC, not the attorney generals. It is up to us.
You have actually given me hope, and I have been in despair. I haven't slept through the night in months. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that I'll be able to sleep, but I actually feel hopeful, Michael. I believe when you throw those numbers out between the people who watch you, other shows everywhere, we need to keep building, keep telling the truth, and keep showing up. I cannot wait to the day that we flood the National Mall and we're sitting on Lincoln's lap inside of the Lincoln Memorial.
By the way, I almost got arrested for that in 1985. So let me be very clear.
Sure.
Don't do that.
We are so similar. Right? My mindset.
When I was at American University from 84 to 88, it was either 85 or 86. I climbed up Lincoln and I got myself in a little bit of trouble there. Guys, like,
you know what? I'm glad I did not know you in college, because I was troubled too. So no.
Well, there you go.
I won't do that.
Jen, let me say thank you, my darling. I appreciate you. You helped to make us all smarter. Join the fight with us. You're certainly somebody who could help to influence so many people as we, again, build this community into the force that we need to be.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.